Demonstrators nationwide are protesting defying social distancing orders and calling for an end to coronavirus lockdowns. People are frustrated, businesses have been decimated. People are running low on savings and money, and if they don't get back to work soon, then they will lose all of their possessions. My biggest fear is that if people start to go hungry, then real riots will start. Dr. Ron Paul wrote a recent article where he asks the question, what if the lockdown was a giant mistake? What if the cure is worse than the disease? Countries like Sweden that did not lock down their economy and place the population under house arrest are faring no worse than countries that did. Sweden's deaths per million from coronavirus is lower than in many lockdown countries. Imagine if we had used even a fraction of the resources spent to lock down the entire population and focused on providing assistance and protection to the most vulnerable, the elderly and those with serious medical conditions. We could have protected these people and still had an economy to go back to when the virus had run its course. And it wouldn't have cost us $6 trillion either. What if the stimulus money had been used instead to care for the elderly in nursing homes who statistically are the most affected? It would have been far better for the government to do nothing at all than surrender to hysteria. This was probably one of the greatest F-ups in the entire history of humanity. Governments have no right or authority to tell us what business or other activity is essential. Only in totalitarian states does the government claim this authority. We should encourage all those who are standing up peacefully and demanding an accounting from their elected leaders. They should not be able to get away with this. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here because you want to hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This has been a fiasco since day one. Once politicians become involved in any crisis situation, the outcome is a foregone conclusion. Total mayhem and disaster. It is a complete mistake. It is also deliberate. This is absolutely unbelievable. They started off using the Chinese model. They're still using the Chinese model, and there are Chinese drones chasing down pedestrians in the United States of America screaming orders. Nobody bats an eyelash. What's next? Welding us into our homes as they did in communist China. The lockdown was not simply a mistake, but a well-thought-out attack on our civil liberties and freedoms. On our economy and on our health. If you want to know who committed the crime, simply ask who benefits the most from it. The answer to that is Bill Gates. The virus will return, and we cannot shut down economies each time it does. We should never have shut down economies this time around. Quarantine could have been done without shutting down the entire economies of states. Such cute sales and marketing from the seditious traitors. Stay home and stay safe while we take over your life and ruin it, destroy the currency and world economy, the world markets, and plot how to implement ID 2020 for the UN in order to track your every movement 24 hours a day because we're paranoid, delusional, psychopathic control freaks that serve Satan and the hierarchy. The economy was built to break. Consumer-based economic theory was ill-conceived. When one side of the trade makes trinkets and is a net purchaser of debt, China, and the other side buys the trinkets and issues the debt, USA, there is going to be a feedback loop when either side falters. In this case, both sides got crushed. When China was under quarantine, they lost a huge amount of revenue because they were not producing. Now they must sell their US Treasuries holdings to support their economy. Now that the USA is in quarantine, they don't have the income to purchase and consume, meaning they need to issue more debt to make up for the lost revenue. Now everyone is selling US Treasuries, either as issuance or on the market. This log jam of debt means the only way to stay liquid is for the Fed to buy. Then this creates the next problem, and that is issuing too much of a currency without production behind it. What makes a currency strong is the faith in production behind it. No one wants the currency of a nation-state that has low GDP, because how is that country going to be successful in paying back debts and ensuring its market in the future? This is why the whole world economy is dead. There is no real production. America. Endless food lines, deaths of despair, wages gone, a tiny stipend from the Fed. New World Order planned for years under the right crisis. The globalists are just giving us a taste of what's to come. It was a huge fraud as cover for banksters' lootings and new laws to take away freedom and to track the human cattle. Fear is the political currency of the 21st century. It is what is traded, and it is used to motivate and control you. Our elected leaders are at war with your emotions, fear is their weapon, and the battleground is your mind. The lockdown was a big mistake. But it was not a random, innocent mistake. The public was deliberately misled, misinformed, and scared into going along with the worst train wreck ever. There was a conspiracy. The tyrannical lockdown was and is a huge mistake. Americans have had enough of big government, on all levels. Our government is way too dysfunctional to trust with my safety and security, even if I wanted to. Isolating and taking away a person's ability to provide for themselves is what abusers and slave masters have done throughout human history. Our elected officials took an oath to uphold the Constitution, which is supposed to protect our rights to self-determination, not create dependence on a collapsing government. It was legitimate to prepare our medical capacity for a surge, given all the unknowns at the time, and there wasn't time for due process. That was the emergency, we were told, and was the premise for emergency powers. But as more data and info emerged and we increased capacity, instead of proportionately releasing some restrictions, they tightened up even more. They changed the definition of an emergency. That's where they ran the red light with me, specifically state and local governments, who had already taken it upon themselves to go well beyond the federal government's guidelines. It was a huge fiasco, purposely closing down humanity's small and medium-sized businesses martial law style. Small business alone employs 70% of the workers. Reason matters. Especially if it is through a coronacon. Instant collapse whilst removing all our God-given rights and freedoms in a handover to a police state. All because of the flu. A flu that history will record as not unlike any other flu or plague throughout history. Except unprecedented government actions altered history by instituting draconian actions that resulted in far more damage than the actual disease would if it were to run its natural course. It is also and especially, a coronacon mask behind which a totalitarian world dictatorship. Coup d'état against humanity by our sneak rulers is being attempted right now. Hence the police state plus fines and imprisonment for those who don't obey. How else are they going to continue supporting bankers when they supposedly fixed the problem in 2008? Create an elaborate ruse based on unsubstantiated statistics, mirroring tactics straight out of communist China. What was needed was an airtight alibi to further corrupt the dollar. COVID-19 fits the bill. The restrictions too will need to continue, for if they don't, a new excuse will be needed to continue further easing, which will most certainly be the case. Boycott the banker, promoted commie meme, social distancing, and disobey, revolt, and fight back for yours and your children's and grandchildren's sake. Of course, the treasonous golden handcuffed intellectuals, really the eunuchs of the Corona world order. Usually rewarded with big titles and big grants, will not be speaking out against the coronacon but speaking with forked tongues, like Dr. Fauci, who is linked to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Hillary Clinton Foundation, Chinese Communist Party, CDC, WHO, Chan Zuckerberg Global Initiative, etc. But humanity everywhere has had enough and now is fighting back. Protests against the quarantines are appearing globally, but are being downplayed by the fakestream media. They have not taken responsibility for the misinformation, and they're not going to. They keep moving the goalposts. We have become socialized, nationalized with a fascist twist and massive debt. And just because they say parts of America are allowed to go back to work doesn't mean they will, because they have managed to paralyze people with fear. The workforce in our country will never be the same. Our Constitution and Bill of Rights have been completely shredded under this administration. Economic irreparable damage has been done to many. Many small businesses are facing obstacles trying to get those forgivable loans. Oil is down. Bad news for the petrodollar. Things are spiraling downward, and a little $1,200 check isn't gonna help. No one in the world wants to buy any more of our toxic assets either, not even China. And if the brick ever hits, we're in huge trouble. Our petrodollars are the only thing left propping up our fiat. Big mistake like the coronavirus is a common thing, and they are exaggerating the numbers by changing the causes of death from other diseases to COVID-19. The media and the so-called experts have us believe that the current COVID-19 death toll is certainly an underestimate, arguing many COVID-19 deaths have been misidentified as pneumonia deaths in the absence of positive test results. So doctors cannot attribute the cause of death to COVID-19 if no test results are available? Not necessarily. Here is a direct quote from CDC's guidance for certifying deaths due to COVID-19. Ideally, testing for COVID-19 should be conducted, but it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on a death certificate without this confirmation if the circumstances are compelling within a reasonable degree of certainty. If doctors are allowed to report COVID-19 on a death certificate without test results, should we not be concerned more about overestimation? Plus, pneumonia is not the only gray area where misidentification of the cause of death can occur. Don't you think it can't happen with heart attack deaths? Dr. Marcus Placia, Chief Medical Officer for the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, said if a heart attack patient is pronounced dead and is tested positive for COVID-19, I would put COVID-19 as the primary cause. Because most likely, the heart attack was caused by the fever or difficulty in breathing. Several problems with this assumption. First, the symptoms of the novel coronavirus are almost identical to the flu. Second, it does not take into account the patient's comorbidity, BMI, and health condition. Third, SARS-CoV-2 is a new virus and most likely was introduced to the patient very recently. In other words, his pre-existing cardiovascular conditions have caused far more extensive damage for a much longer period of time than did COVID-19. Don't you see it? This is nothing short of a nationwide conspiracy to inflate the COVID-19 death toll by identifying all deaths with COVID-19 as deaths from COVID-19. People need to realize that the government is not there to benefit the masses. What made this flu 10 times worse is that it occurred during an election year after a failed impeachment circus. This was the Atlantis Report. Please like, share, subscribe. And please take some time to subscribe to my backup channels, I do upload videos there too. You'll find the links in the description box. You will also find a PayPal link if you want to make a donation. Thank you wholeheartedly to all those of you who have already donated. Stay safe and healthy.